In this video, I'm identifying 10 of my favorite champagnes that cost $50 or less. These videos continue to be well received, so if there's a particular category you'd like me to do a video about, please let me know in the comments below. Let's get right into it. According to producer Andre CLOUET, Pinot Noir does not age in a linear fashion. Upon reaching its 6th year, it passes into a phase that they describe as the whirlwind. Propelled by an unseen force, it reaches outward, taking on another dimension. The wine becomes charged with energy and vibrations. It glows and becomes transcendent. This was Andre CLOUET's inspiration for the V6 experience. This is my first favorite champagne that costs about $50 or less. This particular bottling consists of 100% Pinot Noir from DipWSET. The current release features 80% of the outstanding 2012 vintage as a base, and also includes 20% reserve wine from a cellar, which includes the impressive 2002 and 2008 vintages. So this is definitely one that I recommend. My second favorite champagne at $50 or less per bottle is LANSON's Black Label, which I recently found for $40 a bottle. Champagne LANSON was founded in 1760 and is the 4th oldest champagne house. This particular producer offers compelling value at a variety of price points, and this one is an exceptional value at $40 or so. LANSON's approach is to make a strict selection of fruit, to use mostly no malolactic fermentation, and to use a relatively high percentage of reserve wines in this blend. They have a minimum 30% requirement, although this particular bottling bumped that up a little bit and uses an impressive 35% of reserve wines, which is much greater than the industry average, which is only about 10 to 12% or so. In addition, LANSON likes to age this wine on the lees for much longer than the required amount, typically about 4 years or so. That's going to give this champagne some impressive autolytic descriptors like the toast and the brioche that I enjoy so much. This blend is 50% Pinot Noir, 35% Chardonnay, and 15% Meunier. Impressively, it also includes a blend of wines from more than 100 different vineyards, which adds great complexity to this blend. So this is another one that I definitely recommend. My next favorite champagne for $50 or less per bottle is the Charles Heidsieck Brut Reserve, which I recently found for $45 per bottle. Charles Heidsieck was established in 1851 and is one of the Grand Marquis champagne houses. This producer likes to explain this bottling with the equation 60, 40, 10. 60 represents the number of different wines or crus that are included in this blend, and that's divided equally between Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. 40 is the percentage of reserve wine that is used for this champagne. That's divided equally between Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, both of which age better than Meunier. And as mentioned, this is much greater than the industry average, which is only 10 to 12%, and which helps to increase the complexity of this champagne. 10 represents the average age of the reserve wines. Specifically, this producer ages the reserve wine in vats for between 5 and 15 years. 10 represents the average of that period. That again is another factor that helps to increase the complexity of this blend. This producer offers compelling value. I've sometimes found this bottle for as little as $40 per bottle, so definitely shop around, but regardless of the price, if you can find it anywhere under $50, it's definitely a compelling value. My next favorite champagne at about $50 or less per bottle is the LARMANDIER-BERNIer Extra Brut Blanc de Blanc Latitude, which I found for $50 per bottle. This is a producer that emphasizes sustainability, which is always a challenge in champagne. They pride themselves on organically grown crus and have been producing biodynamically for 20 years. This is a Blanc de Blanc, so it's 100% Chardonnay. The name Latitude is given to this champagne for 2 reasons. First, all the vineyard sources come from the same latitude. Second, Latitude was thought to be a good description of this champagne because it's a round cuvee with a rich, charming style. The current release is based on the 17 vintage, and 40% is reserve wine that comes from a perpetual reserve that was started in 2004. There were only about 6,000 cases made, and not much makes it into the United States, but I nevertheless wanted to include this one because I think very highly of it, and because I think it's well worth seeking out if you're able to track it down. My next favorite champagne at $50 a bottle or less is Champagne COLLET's Art Deco Brut, which I found for $50 recently. This producer was established in 1921, around the time that thousands of champagne producers founded the Champagne Producers Union. This is a quality producer with a wide range of champagnes, but the Brut Art Deco is the one I recommend at $50 or so. This champagne is a blend of 40% Chardonnay, 40% Pinot Noir, and 20% Meunier. It's an assemblage of 7 Grand Crus and 13 Premier Crus, so they definitely have some high quality fruit sources that go into it. It spends 4 years on the lees, which helps to give it complexity in those autolytic descriptors such as the toast and brioche. And this is definitely an excellent choice if you can find it at $50 or less. PIPER-HEIDSIECK's CUVEE BRUT is my next favorite champagne at $50 or less per bottle. This was Marilyn Monroe's favorite champagne, and she started every day with a glass of it. She also kept a month's supply in her kitchen to make sure she didn't run short. Interestingly, this champagne house has its inception in a love story. Back in 1777, Florenz Louis Heidsieck became obsessed with producing a wine that smiles to win the love of his muse. And so he dedicated himself and became obsessed with producing a top champagne. It took him 8 years, but in 1785 he succeeded and founded the predecessor to what is now PIPER-HEIDSIECK, and also married the love of his life. This champagne has been featured in Wine Spectator's Top 100 Wines, and it's a blend from more than 100 different vineyards, which gives it lots of complexity, and it contains an impressive 25% of reserve wines, which is more than double the industry standard. Better still, I found it for as little as $37 per bottle recently, so you can often find it for much less than $50. GOSSET's Grand Brut Reserve is my next favorite champagne at $50 or less per bottle. GOSSET is the oldest house in Champagne, founded way back in 1584. The fruit for this particular bottling is sourced almost exclusively from Grand Cru and Premier sources. Like LANSON, GOSSET uses no malolactic fermentation and extended lees aging, often aging this particular bottling 4 to 5 years on the lees. Foregoing malolactic fermentation helps to preserve high acidity, and this champagne is known for its precise acid structure. The 2015 vintage is 80 to 90% of the current bottling, with the rest made up from 2013 and 2014 juice. This champagne is 45% Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, with 10% for Meunier. I recently found it for $45 per bottle, and it's definitely a compelling buy at that price point. My next favorite champagne at $50 or less per bottle is the ALFRED GRATIEN Brut. This producer made its first champagne in 1864. This producer makes champagne a little bit differently in that they ferment and age in oak barriques. This adds texture to the wine and often gives it some umami descriptors, which would be a little bit distinguishable from many of the champagnes we've discussed in this list. They also forego malolactic fermentation, which helps to preserve the high acidity in the champagne. It also contains a high percentage of reserve wine from a cellar. This is a very high quality champagne that can be had for about $40 per bottle if you do a little bit of shopping. And definitely if you can find it at that price, I certainly recommend it. My next favorite champagne at $50 or less per bottle was first produced way back in 1808, albeit under a different name. The HENRIOT Brut Souverain is 50% Chardonnay, 45% Pinot Noir, and only 5% Meunier. It's an assemblage of wines from 25 different vineyards, 2/3 of which are either Grand Cru or Premier Cru. So certainly some impressive fruit sources. It includes a relatively high percentage of reserve wines, specifically 30%, and it undergoes an impressive 3 years of lees aging, which is much longer than the requirement. This producer flies a bit under the radar, but offers excellent value, and it is certainly a no-brainer if you can find it for $40 or less, and I was able to find it for as little as $38 recently. So certainly I would snap some up if you can find it at that price. My next favorite champagne at $50 or less per bottle is the LAURENT Perrier La Cuvée Brut. This producer was founded way back in 1812. This is a replacement for the LAURENT Perrier Brut that was created after the producer obtained additional fruit sources in the Côte de Blanc, which is where Chardonnay thrives and does extremely well. This allowed LAURENT Perrier to increase the percentage of Chardonnay in the blend, and they also added an extra years of lees aging. These changes both paid big dividends, and this is a very impressive champagne for the price point. Specifically, I found it for about $45 per bottle, which is very fair for this wine. It consists of 50% Chardonnay, 35% Pinot, and about 15% Meunier. They also use 15 to 30% reserve wines from multiple vintages, which helps to add complexity. If you're interested in more wines that cost around $50 per bottle, I have 2 other videos you may enjoy. One is my favorite Bordeaux for $50 or less, and the other is a variety of my favorite reds at $50 or less. Links to these videos are in the descriptions below.